Hello, everyone. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well this morning. Well, it's morning here in Colorado. Wherever you are, hope you're doing well. We've had several new people join the group lately. Last few days, we've had several new folks, and we're getting people from all over the world. There were people from New Zealand and at least one person, I believe, from the Philippines. So welcome. You guys are probably watching this later since you're in a different time zone. It's probably night there. So this morning I wanted to go through, I was going through our questions that we ask when you join the group. And I ask about, challenges that you've faced in parenting. And a lot of people recently, especially, have mentioned wanting to become a more patient parent and needing help with staying calm with your kids and those types of things. So this morning I thought I would try to tackle a little bit of that issue. It's a big issue, and all of us, I think, that are parents struggle with being patient. So I want to talk a little bit about that this morning. Just as a, precursor, I am not the perfect parent. I never claimed to be, and I struggle with this as well. So the tips that I'm talking about are a few things that have helped me, but also a few things that we have learned from research as well. And so I hope that this can be something helpful. Okay, so being a more patient parent. Why should we even try is the first question. It's pretty obvious, but first of all, I think we don't want to be those parents that are mean to our kids, right? We don't want to be the parents that yell and scream at our kids. That's not a fun feeling for anybody. But the bigger picture, I think, is modeling. We want to be a model for our kids of self-regulation. And what we know from research is, kids really learn through what they see. And so if we can, as much as we can, model patience and calm with them, that really does help them learn that self-regulation skills for themselves. And so to me, that's the bigger picture that we should always keep in mind. It's, none of us want to be the angry parent all the time, of course, but also we are modeling for our kids, and they pay attention to what we do and they emulate what we do. And so as much as we can be patient, it really does help model those skills for them. The other point is, and I just posted an article about this recently on my page, is yelling really does not work. Research has shown us that when people, grown-ups included, or kids, have this sense of anxiety and fear, they can't internalize what we're trying to tell them. And so even though in the moment it might seem like, oh, when I yell, my kid really responds and they straighten up and they, do what I want them to do, it's not a good long-term strategy, yelling, because they're not really internalizing the lesson that you're trying to teach them, whatever it might be. And so because we're in that state of fight or flight, and your, stress hormones are pumping, and that's what happens when anybody yells at us. When we yell at our kids, when our boss yells at us or whatever, we can't respond well to that. No one really can. And they can't really internalize what we're teaching them. So yelling really is not an effective strategy for most people, for grown-ups, or for talking to kids as well. So that's good to keep in mind, that we can find other approaches that help teach lessons to our kids and teach what we want to pass along to them without the yelling. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of learning. When you're thinking about, okay, why do I get angry at my kids? Why do I lose my patience? Thinking about, how can I separate the kid's behavior from the context in which it's happening? And so I think this is something I have read about and kind of reflected on over the last few years, and it has been helpful. And this whole thing that I'm talking about today is kind of the core, one of the basis of positive parenting, but also it's just sort of reflecting on ourselves and thinking about the cause of why we behave certain ways. And so it's sort of the classic psychological approach to understanding behavior. Okay, so understanding the behavior separate from the context in which it happens. So trying to think back over in the past, when I've gotten upset at my kids, was I really upset at their behavior, something they were doing? Or was I upset because of another reason that was sort of underlying that, or the context of the situation that may have prompted me to become more upset than I might normally. And so I think this is helpful to think about. Look in the past, think about times you've lost your patience, and this can give you some insight into future, issues that might come up. So I have an example that I thought of my own life. And so bear with me here as I go through this little example. A few years ago, I want to say my older son was about 7 and my younger was probably about 3. My husband had been out of town for a few days. So that in itself, okay, the context of the situation, it was a little bit stressful. He'd been out of town, and that's always hard when the other parent is not around. So we decided to do a little outing. We had an afternoon free, and my older son had been learning to roller skate. And so I thought, oh, let's go to the roller rink and we'll hang out for a little while and let them burn off some energy. I think it was in the winter and it was cold outside. So we go to the skating rink, and my 7-year-old was pretty good at skating. So he got his skates on, took off, and he was doing his own thing. He was doing great. And I knew from the beginning that my 3-year-old would not probably be able to skate. I mean, that was a lot to ask. And so I had thought beforehand, okay, we're going to be kind of walking around figuring out something to do while the older one's skating. I knew that might be an issue. So the 3-year-old and I kind of walk around the roller rink, and there's, of course, arcade games there, skee ball and basketball and video games and things there. And so he wanted to play those. And so I gave in and I let him play a few games, and we're walking around. Well, as the time goes on, you know how toddlers are. He starts to get antsy and fussy, and the games were a good diversion for a little while, but it was becoming more crowded in the place, and he was getting overstimulated, I could tell, and starting to lose his cool a little bit. And so I started getting a little anxious and thinking, gosh, we're going to have to leave because he's going to throw a fit. So I started telling my older son, look, we're going to have to go soon because your brother is, getting upset, and this is not a great environment for him. And so he was the older one was kind of bummed because he wanted to skate more, So I let him skate a little bit longer. Things start to go downhill pretty quickly with the toddler as things go. He starts fussing about games and he wants to play more, or, some of them were very frustrating to him because they were really for older kids and he couldn't really do them. So time goes on, and finally I tell my older son, look, we have to go. Like, I know, I'm sorry you didn't get to skate as long as you wanted, but we have to go. Your brother's about to throw a fit and just full on tantrum. So he pretty well, gets his skates off, and we're doing pretty well. And then as we're about to walk out the door, he sees the toy area where you can cash in your tickets for toys. And we had some tickets because we played some video games. So he starts wanting to do that. And about the same time, this huge group of middle school kids start walking in the door. And I just know this is not going to be a pretty scene. We need to leave because it's getting crowded. The toddler is now in full on tantrum mode. We need to get out of there, right? So I tell my older one, look, we can't do the toys. We have to go. Let's just get out of here. It's crowded and your brother's throwing a fit. So we leave. And by the time we get to the car, they're both crying. Everyone's throwing a fit. And I start yelling because I had just was up to my limit, right? Okay, so not my proudest parenting moment, as is any of us who've gone through something like that. But what can we learn from the situation, right? Looking back and reflecting on this. Why did I get so upset in this situation when my kids have thrown fits leaving a store or a amusement park? This happens to all of us, right? They don't want to leave, they throw a fit. Okay. Usually I deal with it a little more calmly. That day I didn't. Why not? Well, first off, when I thought about it later, I realized I wasn't necessarily upset at their behavior, right? A toddler throwing a fit is pretty much expected in that situation. And even a 7-year-old, it's not uncommon for him to be disappointed leaving. So it wasn't really their behavior when I thought about it later. It was the situation, right? We were in kind of a stressful situation. It wasn't and that was my fault. It wasn't the best choice to take them to a place like that. It was crowded. The toddler got overstimulated. Everyone got upset. Mainly, I think, because of kind of the stress of the situation and not having the right expectations for what was going to happen with this situation. And so I think that helps us understand the difference between your child's behavior in a particular situation and the context. And that situation, I blame the context. And that was me for making a bad choice to take them there and not having the proper expectations about how their behavior was going to be. So if you can look back on situations where something like this has happened to you and try to break apart, was this the situation or was their behavior really the problem? And sometimes that can help you be more patient in the future because you can plan ahead and not go to those types of situations. Or if you're in that situation, you can think ahead about that it might be stressful and how am I going to handle this if they start to throw a tantrum, or you can kind of plan ahead and get your mind in the right mind space. I think that helps all of us become more patient when we have the right expectations about a situation. And if the situation is too stressful, try not to do it if you can avoid it, or talk to your kids beforehand about how the situation is going to play out and things that might be a problem. And so if I would have done that, or maybe even not taken them there, then that situation probably would have gone a lot smoother. So the patience part, I think, comes in a little bit of planning and also realizing the situational stressors that can be affecting you. And so in that situation, it was the actual context, right? In other situations, it might be something that's going on in your own life or your own situation that is making things harder and making it harder for you to be patient. And so some other kind of contextual things might be that you're overtired. This is common for all of us, right? When you didn't sleep well the night before, or you've been up multiple nights with a baby that doesn't sleep through the night, that can put you on edge just enough to lose your patience during the day. And that is actually something that is proven by research. It's not just one of those things you see on Facebook with the tired mom, right? This is a real thing. And I just, I have an article that I posted a while back, and they've done research on this. And moms who are overtired tend to be less patient with, especially with toddlers, but any kids. It really does affect you. It's not just your imagination. So if you're overtired, that is more about the context of the situation probably than actually your child's behavior in some situations. Another contextual thing it could be is just general stress from your job. Maybe something's going on with your marriage or your relationship that's causing this underlying stress, and then your kid does something and you lash out, and it's not always really what your kid did, their behavior. It's this underlying stress that's putting you on edge. And so I think being aware of those factors that could be causing extra stress, that may be kind of, tipping off your patience with your child, that those things are good to be aware of, because if you can help manage those in some way, if it's possible, to get those stress factors under control, those contextual things, then you're more likely to be patient with your children when they act out in a way that you're not expecting or doesn't, meet your expectations. Okay, so that's the first part, is understanding sort of the context of the situation and other factors that might be playing into it that are, promoting this problem of you not being patient with your kids. Okay, so then if you can break that apart and you're saying, okay, in some situations it's the context, in some situations it really is my kid's behavior. So what do you do if it really is your kid's behavior? If they're doing something that you really feel is inappropriate and it's making it really hard for you to keep your patience, or they're very strong-willed, whatever the issue might be with their behavior. And so again, I think it helps to look back at past behavior and try to understand what is it about your child's behavior that is triggering you to lose your patience or to be more likely to. And so one thing I like to look for when you think about this in your own situation is look for patterns in your child's behavior. Are there certain things that your child does that really pushes your buttons and makes it more likely that you're going to lose your patience? If you can see some pattern in that, then sometimes you can help work through that with them, or just be reflective about it and know that that's a trigger for you and be mindful of that when it happens. And so you can really work hard to be patient in that situation and calm yourself and use some strategies. So one thing that I think is often a trigger is having expectations that are perhaps not developmentally appropriate. And so I was just reading an article the other day about how they had done this survey of parents, and at least a third, I believe it was, of parents of 1-year-olds believed that their 1-year-old could tell the difference between right and wrong. Okay, let's think about that for a minute. If you have that expectation of your 1-year-old that they know right from wrong, that sets a much higher bar for their behavior than if you don't. And that is not really a developmentally appropriate expectation of a 1-year-old. So that's one of the reasons actually I started this blog and this group, was so that we could have expectations for our child's behavior that are appropriate for their age. And I can post some resources in here, but I think a lot of times in our culture, we have these expectations that our kids, especially when they're toddlers, are supposed to sit still and follow directions and behave and go to some public place or wait at an appointment and be little cherubs sitting in their chairs the whole time. And it's really not a developmentally appropriate expectation for a toddler. And so I think if you have that mindset going in, if you have to wait somewhere or you're going to a restaurant and just have the expectation that, this is not the ideal situation for a toddler, and that's just a toddler, example. There could be other examples, but, try to have an appropriate expectation for how your kid might act in a certain situation. That can help a lot, because if you going in that things may get out of hand or things could lose control very easily because this is not a great context for a kid, then you're much more likely to be patient, I think, because you kind of expect the unexpected, like this could go badly at any moment. And so I'm just going to go in with that expectation and roll with it. Okay. And that helps you understand, I think, that when your kid maybe acts irrationally, that it's not completely out of the blue. So developmentally appropriate expectations can help. The other thing is look for triggers with your kid's attitude. So are there certain attitudes that your kids might have or that you think that they are expressing that are triggers for you? So for instance, if you think your child is acting ungrateful, is that a trigger for you? If you think they're acting disrespectful to you, is that the trigger for you? In some situations, perhaps they are acting that way. And sometimes it's your interpretation of that. Are they really acting ungrateful, or is something else going on? Okay. And so if you have that as a trigger, like any little disrespect triggers you, and that in advance, you can try to put that kind of inner dialogue at peace and say, okay, let's look at the situation. Are they really being disrespectful, or is something else going on? Are they tired? Are they upset because something happened at school? So dig in a little bit deeper to the situation before you react. That can really help. And that has happened to me multiple times, where my son comes home from school and he's starting to break down and have a meltdown. And my first thought is like, he is just being unreasonable. Like, what's going on? He's not acting, like he normally does. Maybe he's being, at times I have thought like, oh, he's being disrespectful. He's talking back or whatever. But then I dig a little deeper and I ask a few questions. We'll come to find out he had a bad day at school and somebody teased him, or he didn't do as well on a test as he expected. And so really it wasn't disrespect. It was this underlying factor. And that has helped me a lot to understand my own triggers and how can I be calmer in this situation, and look a little deeper that the outward behavior is not always what you might think. So looking for the attitude that might trigger you and thinking through that a little bit beforehand. And then lastly, the other issue, and I talk a lot about this on the blog, is temperament. If you have a different temperament from your child, or sometimes even if you have the same temperament, it can be tricky to understand your child's temperament so that you know where their behavior might be coming from. This is big. Sometimes it can be a real eye-opener. So that one example that I have from our situation is, I've talked about this before. My older son is very outgoing, very social, very extroverted, and I am the complete opposite. I like downtime. I like quiet. So this can be the source of some conflict and the source of me losing my patience. And this may be the same for you if you have differing temperaments. And so there are times when we'll go to an activity or a camp or something that he really wants to do that's very social and outgoing, and he loves it. That's great. And then he comes back to the car, I pick him up from the activity, and he just wants more, more, more. it's like he cannot get enough social stimulation, right? He wants to go have a play date after that. He wants to go swimming after that. He wants to do something else that's very engaging and high energy. And all I want to do is go home and take a nap, right? So this can cause some conflict and me losing my patience because his needs are not what my needs are. And so I think if you understand it from a temperamental perspective and you say, okay, this is just his temperament. He's very outgoing. He's very social. This is like a physiological need for him to be socially engaged with people. My physiological need is to have some downtime. So if you can understand that from a temperamental perspective and that he's not just being rude, he's not being disrespectful, he's not being ungrateful, this is something that is part of his personality. Then you can talk through it and say, work on some sort of compromise. And that is where the patience comes in and thinking through, you know, he's not doing this because he's a bad kid. It's all about your mindset, right? He's doing this because this is a need he has. And so then you can work on some sort of compromise, maybe about, you know, maybe you have some downtime first, then you go do something else or work out something where you both get what you need in the situation. But understanding temperament can really help you see the situation differently and help you keep your patience, I believe. So I'll put a link if anyone's interested in the ebook that I have about temperament. I think it can help in that situation if you think temperament might be part of what's going on and why you're losing your patience. Okay, so and just the overarching theme again here is sort of reflecting on things that have happened in the past, times that you have lost your temper, and reflecting on the context of the situation as well as your child's behavior and looking for patterns that might help you act differently in the future. And so that has been something that has been helpful to me. And thinking through those things can help you in the, you know, like I said, help you in the future to maybe be more patient in the situation if you change sort of your mindset and understanding why things are going a certain way and why your kid is acting a certain way or why you are reacting a certain way. That can really help. Okay, so that's all I have for today. I hope that was helpful to you guys. If you would like some sort of handout or slide deck of this information, just chime in the comments and say that. I did not put a slide deck or any sort of content printable or anything together for this, but if people would find it helpful, please put that in the comments and I would be happy to put together notes of some sort for this if you think that would help you. Something maybe you could hang on your fridge or just something you could look at later. If that would be helpful to you, you know, put something in the comments and I can send it out to the group or to you specifically. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a good day and see you next time.